All right, I think we may now be live on the site. Let me just check it before we go. And I think so. I want to welcome everybody to another weekly episode of Conversations with Commodores. And if you don't recognize this lady who's here with me, you haven't been around the program. June, good evening, and thank you for having some time for us this evening.
Always time for the Vanderbilt boys.
Oh, and we know that well. If you guys don't know June Jakes was with the program for 20 plus years in various capacities, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But June, for folks who haven't been in touch with you in a while, what are you doing these days? What part of the country are you living in? And tell us a little bit about yourself and your family.
Okay, I'm in Nashville, and I'm retired. After I left Vanderbilt, I went to LSU for 5 years, and then I came back to Nashville when my parents got to be end of life issues, and went to work for Caterpillar Financial right there on West End, right across the street from Vanderbilt. And then I retired 3 years ago, and now I'm living the life.
Very good. I bet you are. I'm sure. Well, I know from the mid 70s to the mid 90s, you called Jess Ely your home. So tell the folks, I know you had a bunch of different positions and held different titles and responsibilities. So what brought you to Vanderbilt to begin with? How did you end up working at the school?
Okay. I'd been a Vanderbilt fan all my life, ever since I could ever remember. And I grew up outside Nashville in a little town called Joelton, and went to school there. And I was an athlete. I played basketball and thoroughly enjoyed it. And after I got out of school, I married and stayed at home had two daughters, stayed at home. And of course, I'd go to the ball games and things, but I started into ceramics. And we had a guy in my Sunday school class, his sister was in there, and he was helping his neighbor, and he fell out of a tree and was paralyzed from the shoulders down.
Oh my.
And we were redoing his, I guess you call it assisted living room. And he was a big Commodore fan. Steve Sloan would go and visit him all. And so I made a set of Commodore Club. I made a set of Commodore athletes, the basketball player, the football player, and a coach and all that in ceramics to go in his room. And to get the color right, I went out to the athletic department and walked in, and they told me I needed to go to sports information. And there I met June Stewart, and she gave me a media guide so I could get the uniforms just right. And I got them done. And she said, now, when you get them done, I'd like to see them. So I brought them back out there to let her see them. And we got to talking, and she invited me back another day. And I went out, we had lunch, and we toured the facilities. And I made the remark, I said, if I ever go back to work, this is what I want to do. And she said, we're going to have a part-time job opening the 1st of August. Do you want it? And so I started working with the Commodore Club part-time. And that way, when my girls were out of school, I stayed home. When they were, and then that went on until the youngest one was toward the end of elementary school. And then I went to work full-time in marketing and promotions. And from that, it just went on and on.
So was that during the summer going into the fall of 76?
Yes.
And how long were you in the Commodore Club? How long was that?
I was in the Commodore Club until Mr. Kramer came, and I would say he came in 79, 78, 79. Okay. And that's when we started the marketing and promotions department. And Paul Kennedy came in, and Paul Kennedy and I worked together in marketing and promotions. And
wow, they keep coming forward.
Clay Stapleton was the AD when I first came there. And I went through Clay Stapleton, Roy Kramer, Paul Houlihan, and Todd Turner.
Wow. Well, there's some names from the past. So you were in marketing, and then I know you shifted over to recruiting at some point. How did you end up in the recruiting department?
Well, whenever Beverly Brothers, as you know, was in football recruiting. And when Coach Mack came, that job became vacant when the girl that was there she left, and Beverly replaced her. and that left the recruiting job open. And so Gene DiFilippo and those asked me if I would move over to football recruiting, and I moved over to football recruiting. And as I would say, the rest is history.
Gotcha. And then eventually you shifted out of recruiting over to assisting, I guess, the head coach or the AD. Talk to us about that job.
Whenever I was in football recruiting, and Coach Brown was there, it was real funny. I worked with Van Holloway in recruiting, and Coach Capilla was there. I don't know if he was there when you were there or not, but he had got hit. A player hit him out of during practice and messed his back up. Well, it was really funny because Van and I handled all the team travel. We would get the itinerary ready, the rooming list ready, and Van would advance the travel. And of course, Van had been on the field with Watson when they came to Nashville. And so Watson called him in to tell him he was going to have to go back on the field. And he said, "But Van, that leaves us in a mess." Said, "Who are we going to get to advance the travel?" And he said, "JJ can do it. She went down with me to Auburn last week. And lucky with me, we went through everything, going from all the way to the road to dinner and all the meals, everything, all the setups of rooms, the per diem." And so I started my first trip to advance the travel. We flew into New York and we were playing Rutgers. And I flew into New York, met with people from Delta Airlines, and then got a rental car. And this little girl from Joelton got in that rental car and started out on the freeway.
Oh, awesome.
The prettiest sight I have ever seen in my life. And that was before we had GPS. I had a MapQuest directions on a piece of paper to tell me how to get to the Sheridan.
Oh boy. Now, were you traveling alone?
Yes. All by my lonesome. And
wow.
Got on that freeway and started out through there. And as I said, the prettiest sight I ever saw was whenever I got close to the exit, I happened to glance off to my left, and sitting over in front of the Sheridan was this big Ryder truck that says, "We move the Commodores." And I thought, oh, thank God I have gotten here.
I bet that was a good feeling. Well, June, we've got some Commodores who've rolled in. I want to share the names, and they all say to tell you hello. John Griffith, John Newman, Steve Law, Tyler Unzicker are some of the ones who've rolled in so far.
And, yay. Hey, guys, how are you?
Well, thank you guys for sharing some time with JJ and me this evening. Now, over the years, those 4 very, very different job responsibilities, and I'm sure they all had their ups and downs, but did you prefer, looking back at one of those jobs over any of the others?
I enjoyed the football recruiting and the assistant to the head coach. Those were my 2 favorites. But although we had a blast in marketing and promotions,
I'm sure.
Marketing promotions, we opened up with Maryland in the brand new stadium, and all the hoopla that went around that. And we went to the governor's mansion. We went all these places getting the publicity, and we had a blast.
I bet. And I know with recruiting and being the executive assistant to the coach, there was a lot of things that you may have prepared for, but there's probably a lot of things that came last second or change of plans on the fly. You probably had to learn how to adjust very quickly.
You better know how to adjust quickly. And it is funny because, a coach would come in and they may change a lineup just at the last minute. And you had to get all that because we used computers, but we didn't have the computers like we have now. Before that, it was typewriters.
Right. Now
they call it an antique computer.
JJ, we got some new folks have just dropped in, some Commodores that, let's see, OJ Fleming, Dwayne Jones, and a mystery coach has just stopped in, and we'll let you figure out who it is in just a minute. But let's go back.
Has Gary Shepard logged on?
I can't admit it or deny it. But
If it is
Oh,
him,
that's
all I
funny.
want to know for Gary is, Gary, who shot your Paul?
Oh, I knew there was going to be some laughs in here. I didn't know they'd let that quick. That's awesome. Now, JJ, talk to us about recruiting. I'm sure that recruiting young guys coming out of high school who all think they're the greatest thing ever for football, with attitudes, and maybe some thought that they were better than Vanderbilt, but I'm sure there were a whole bunch of really nice guys who came through and were appreciative of their situation. So I'm sure you got the good and the bad with all of that.
Do you know, of all of the guys that came into Vanderbilt, I can truthfully say there was not one that I didn't like.
Wow.
They were different. They came from all different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
Some had grown up, as we like to refer as with the silver spoon in their mouth. Their parents had a plane, and then we had others that brought their clothes to Vanderbilt in a paper bag.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone, when they walked in that door, they were a Commodore and they were black and gold. And I didn't feel any different from one than I did the other. There were some you had to encourage and say, it's going to be all right. Mm-hmm. And there were some that you had to say, you're about to run into somebody that's been as good as you have been. So let's see how you react to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Billy Smith has just joined us. I'm so glad to see that Billy's here.
Yay, Billy.
This evening. JJ, what about the games? Where were you for each of the home games? Let's just talk about the home games.
Okay.
Where were you usually? What was your responsibilities during that day, if any? Where would you attend the game to watch it? Talk to us about that a little bit.
All right. If I was in recruiting, your day started about 7 o'clock in the morning to get there and make sure everything was all set up. The coaches were away at the hotel, and that way, if they needed something, they knew that they could call. We had somebody there, and we were getting set up for the recruits to come in. You had name badges to make. We had parents to set up. We had lunch all set up. You were waiting on them to get there, and then they would start calling from downstairs that different players were here. You'd go get them, and they would go. We would have lunch with them. They would have a meeting with the recruiting coordinator. The assistant coaches, after the team got there, would kind of mingle with them on the sidelines. But during that game, those coaches are focused on that ball game, and they're not focused on recruits. We would see that the recruits had what they needed, had their tickets, and then we would take them into the stands and put them in the stands right in the area that they sat in. Then I would go to my seat, but then right before the game was over, I'd go back and get them and take them to the sidelines and down to the locker room area so they could be with the coaches. And then on Sunday, that was ball game time. And if you won, it was great. And if you didn't win, you made them feel like that we didn't win, but with your talent next year, we could very well be winning. Mm-hmm. And that was the attitude we used on that if we got beat. And then on Sunday, it was back at the office 7 o'clock in the morning, because the coaches would meet the guys for breakfast, and then they would come over and you'd have individual meetings like you remember doing, going in and talking to the coach. And then it was off to lunch, and then you'd go home. But usually if we had a basketball game during recruiting season, all the recruits came to the basketball game. Mm-hmm. And one of the funniest basketball games that I'd been to was, and we landed Alan Young on, and I give our ball game with Auburn the credit for Alan Young. Mm-hmm. Alan Young did not want to come to the South. He was from New York. Mm-hmm. He let Randy Ross know when Randy went up there to see him that he was not interested in coming to the South. He said, I've been through Tennessee one time, going to Atlanta, and I have no desire to go to Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And so Randy told him, said, if you'll just come and visit Vanderbilt and you walk out there and tell me you didn't like it, I will never bother you again. Mm-hmm. So Alan came in, Alan and his mom and dad. And the funniest thing is, they had asked for separate rooms because they were going through a divorce.
Oh, boy.
Oh, but not only did they not have separate rooms, they had one room with a king-size bed when we opened the door.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
Well, they were really, Mr. Young said, that's fine. We'll make do. And they stayed. And the next day, he went over on campus and toured the campus and met with some of the things. And that night we played, or that afternoon we played Auburn. And Alan sat beside me at the ball game. And it was just back and forth and back and forth. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was one of those that we pulled out right at the buzzer. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were standing up cheering. And Alan's mother and daddy was sitting behind us. And after that ball game, because I was cheering, but Alan was standing up on the bleacher yelling. Mm-hmm. And when the game was over with and the students ran out on the field, on the floor, Alan went out on the floor. And his daddy told me after the game, he said, I think the boy will come to school here. And the next day he committed.
Wow.
And he came to Vanderbilt. And after he graduated, he went back to New York. Mm-hmm. And the next thing I know, here comes him down here with the armor doors. And he had moved to Nashville and started a business. And he's very, very successful in this town.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know Alan was a few years behind me, but do you know who was his host for the weekend when he came on his recruiting visit?
No, I don't remember who was it.
Rod Keith is on here watching. Rod, do you happen to know, or any of the other folks who are watching? It looks like James Manley's also joined us. So welcome, guys.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey.
June, those stories, I'm sure you have dozens of those kind of stories that most folks never hear about. They certainly don't make the newspaper. They don't make, maybe the coaches will learn those things at the time that they're going on. But for the rest of us, we never hear those kind of stories. Those are awesome.
Well, there's some good ones. When Coach DiNardo was there, he would come in and he'd say, get so-and-so over here. And I'd have to call him and I'd say, Coach wants to see you. Mm-hmm. And Carlos Thomas came in one day and he asked me when I called him, he said, JJ, am I in trouble? And I said, Carlos, I don't know. Coach just told me to call and tell you he needed to see you. Mm-hmm. Carlos came over, and after he came out, I just got up and hugged him. I said, hey, keep your chin up. But he told me, he said, JJ, I always knew when I was in trouble, because if I walked in your office and you wouldn't look up, I knew I was in trouble. And I never had realized that I wouldn't look up at them if I knew they were going to get ripped.
Well, you know, JJ, between you and Miss Jones, Lucy, and Miss Brothers, the three of y'all were mamas to just dozens and dozens and dozens of athletes throughout the years. And I'm sure that most of the families, I hope that they sent this or expressed to the three of y'all their thanks for just the roles that y'all played, the little things that you're not hired to do these things. It's just natural instinct. It's just being nice.
Bernie, we all three, Lucy played basketball and Beverly played basketball. They played together at Glencliff and I played at Jolton, and we beat them.
And I wanted to make sure you got that in. So thank you for reiterating that.
And I get to tell her all the time, hey, I got 35 points on y'all.
That's so awesome. That is so great. I want to welcome Jimmy Manley says to tell you hello, and Gene Wyndham has just joined us. So thank you, guys. We're taking a great trip with June Jakes with JJ. June, talk to us about, let's talk about the bowl games. And I know there weren't that many during your tenure, but I think that you got to go to the 82 game, the Air Force game. And do you have any specific recollections about how special going to a bowl game was as opposed to the regular season games?
Oh, when we went to played Air Force, that was I had gone to the Peach Bowl, but I didn't work for Vanderbilt at that time. I was a fan, and we went down when Steve Sloan carried the group down to the Peach Bowl. And that was fun, just being a fan. But it wasn't near as much fun as being part of the travel party and part of that group. And but the best part of going to the Hall of Fame Bowl against Air Force was we beat Tennessee to get there. And
That's right.
and that made it wonderful. I've still got the mugs up on my shelf in here where we beat Tennessee.
Oh, I'd love for you when we get finished to take photos and share them. Either you can send them directly to me, or if you want to post
Right.
some of your memorabilia, folks would love to see that. Those are some awesome memories that I'm sure that you have from beating Tennessee in '82.
Right. And you know, the thing of it too is like whenever Coach Mack came, and one day Monty Crook, I was in marketing promotions, he called me down to his office. He said, JJ, can you come down here just a minute? And he had a helmet. And he said, we want a logo for this helmet that says Vandy. He said, can you make us a pattern that does that? And so I went home and wrote it out on fabric and cut it out and glued it and taped it on that helmet and carried it back so they could get pictures of that helmet. And I will tell you, it was fun to watch them when they ran out on the field wearing the helmet that I'd made the logo for.
And that script Vandy?
It's a script Vandy.
Excellent.
And every time I look at it, I said, that's my handwriting.
Oh, see, you put your mark on the program in so many different ways, literally and figuratively. But I never knew the story of that. That's so great.
And my daughters grew up out there. Janine was a student trainer at Vanderbilt. And they started out there. I think she was in about the 3rd grade, and they would come out, and whenever I was in marketing promotion, they'd stuff goodie bags and that kind of stuff. And they would laugh and say they were stadium rats. They would play with June Stewart had Buddy and her daughter. And they would all go over in the stadium and play and go over to the gym. And I said, it was a great place for kids to grow up.
Oh, just such fun memories for you as not only an employee of the program, but a mom who got to bring her kids and other kids who came over there and all of those kids ended up being friends over the years. I'm sure.
Yeah. We had Luke Wyatt was about 17, 18 years old, and he was over selling programs on game day. Every one of our kids sold programs on game day, and they got like a 10% commission. Those kids had a ball. There was Jody and Jody Jones and Dwayne and Jonna and Janine, and all of them were out there. Ken Hudgens' kids, they were all selling programs.
And more than one of them ended up playing for the Commodores.
Right.
Yeah. Jeff Brothers was a few years behind me at the school, but I also want to welcome, let's see, Joe Peebles has joined us, and another one of my teammates, John Donardi, is with us. So thank you guys for stopping by and listening to JJ and me run back through some old memories here. Now, JJ, looks like you're in a sports memorabilia room behind you. Is that some Vanderbilt photos, or are those just from different eras, different teams?
Well, I've got a picture of Coach DiNardo that's autographed by him. There's another one that's in the stands. I'm in the stands, and you can see me and my mom and my dad all at the ball game. And it's whenever we were playing Tulane, and they fumbled the ball, and we recovered a fumble. And they gave me that picture whenever they took it down off the wall. And the other one down at the far end is my 2 daughters sitting up on the shoulders of I think it's Randy Citizen, Ed Smith, Kimmy Weaver, and John Pointer. And that was on Fan Day, and they made their pictures, and they came out in the newspaper. So the girls felt real good about that one.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
Then on the other end, there is a program that's autographed by Bear Bryant, and right underneath it is another plaque that is by Eddie Robinson. And it was funny with Bear Bryant, when he played his last ball game at Vanderbilt. And I wanted to get my program autographed, but with us being busy with all the pregame stuff, you didn't get a chance. And so I guess about 2 or 3 weeks after that, he called at the office or something to speak to one of the coaches. And whenever I got him on the phone, I said, I meant to get you to autograph my football program for the game, and I didn't get to. He said, honey, mail it to me and I'll sign it. He wrote the sweetest note on there.
Oh, wow.
And then about, I guess, after I got that done, the next year, whenever Eddie Robinson was about to break Bear's record, I had Mr. Kramer came up to the office one day, and he said, and I had the Sports Illustrated land there. And he said, JJ, if you want to get that signed today, Eddie and the team will be over here to work out at 5 o'clock. Said, meet me out in front of McGugin and I'll see that you get it autographed. And so he went with, I went out there with him, and Eddie Robinson autographed that one for me that broke Bear Bryant's record that hung up there with it.
Wow. What such great memories. JJ, Coach Kramer was such a important figure, not just to Vanderbilt, but to the SEC for what he did as athletic director. But he was the AD when I came in with Watson's first class, which would have been in the spring of '86. Mm-hmm. And I've got some great stories about Coach Kramer, and I know he's still making headlines. I saw he was quoted in the paper just this last week about college football and the pandemic, and hopefully opening this fall. But I want to take you back to Coach Kramer's time period when you were working there, and the environment that he cultivated, and the way that he treated not just the staff, but really everybody there. Share with us, if you will, some of your experiences about Coach Kramer.
My first experience with him, I was part-time at the time when he came in. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know him. I had not met him. And I was in the sports information, and this little white-haired guy walked by. And I looked at Bill Stewart and I said, who's that little old man? He said, JJ, that little old man is your new athletic director. That man came in, and I will say this, McGugin Center was a family. Mm-hmm. He knew us. He knew our children's names. Sarah Jo knew our children's names. She knew all about them. He would not ask us to do anything he would not do. If basketball had something going on and they were selling tickets and all at last minute, if you worked in football, we went and helped the ticket office sell tickets on Saturdays. And he would be right there with us every step of the way. We would have those tournaments. And if one went into overtime and before the next session came in, you had to clean the gym. And of course they had a crew, but you couldn't get it turned fast enough. Mm-hmm. So we all had garbage sacks picking up Coke mm-hmm. containers and popcorn containers, but it always made you feel good when you looked across that gym and saw that little white-haired man with that trash bag, picking them up and throwing them in there right along with us.
Well, I was going to say, he wouldn't ask you to do something that he wouldn't already have done. He would be doing alongside with you.
And if there was anything he could do to help you, all you had to do is go to him and ask. But I can tell you another thing about him. If you screwed up, mm-hmm. he would let you know that you screwed up. But mm-hmm. I can tell you one thing, anybody that you screwed up with, he would stand there and take up for you loud and long. He didn't throw you under the bus. Mm-hmm. You knew not to do it. And so if you ever made a mistake, the smartest thing you could do was go and stick your head in the door and say, Mr. Kramer, can I talk to you just a minute? He'd say, sure, come on in. You go in, tell him what you did. And he said, okay, let's see what we can do to fix it. And boom, you'd fix it and be gone. But don't surprise him. Let him know ahead of time so he'll know how to handle it. And he was one of the best ones I've ever worked for in my life. I think your screen is frozen.
Come back. Tell me when you can hear me and we'll pick back up.
Okay, I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Okay, it's the internet. Nobody can control.
Right.
We just do the best we can.
One of the funny Roy Kramer stories was all the players come in. I don't know if, I'm not going to give a last name, but all of y'all know when I say Wally out of Georgia. Wally parked he was a freshman, and he parked in the McGugin lot during the start of practice. Well, anybody that parked in McGugin lot got towed. Well, Mr. Kramer had the receptionist call to tow that car. He was out there to meet the wrecker, and Wally saw him, and he said, "You old white-haired SOB, what do you think you're doing? And Watson Brown said that SOB is your athletic director.
I don't know if John Newman is still on watching and listening to this, but I suspect if Wally was there, Newman wasn't too far away from him. So that's funny. Wally was also in my recruiting class, and I'm very close with Wally. And
he's fun. He's fun.
He
but
is. He
it was funny because Mr. Kramer was loyal to a thing, and one kid made the big mistake that came in from Florida as a freshman and had on a Florida cap, a Florida Gator cap. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Kramer walked right by him, took it off his head, threw it in the trash, and said, "We don't wear that stuff around here. We wear Vanderbilt gear," and just kept walking. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the hardest things I had to do with doing player tickets. Mm-hmm. When we would play a Florida, an Alabama, an Auburn, a Tennessee, these players from there would sign up their relatives who came to get their free ticket decked out for the other team from top to bottom.
Right.
And then Mr. Kramer passed a rule that if they came wearing the other team's colors, they didn't get a comp ticket. Mm-hmm. And that was it. But I used to tell the players, I can't believe that Uncle Buddy would come and watch you play football and root for you to get beat. I just can't believe that. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Smart. So smart.
Mm-mm.
Well, what about at some point when you were either in recruiting or as the executive assistant, you would travel to most all of the away games, didn't you? And did you travel with the team or did you travel with other individuals separately?
Well, I advanced the travel all under Watson and through there. I would have to go in on Thursday. I would leave work on Thursday and Thursday evening if I was flying out. But if I could drive, I'd leave on Thursday, and you had to go down and make sure all the rooms were set up. You had a rooming list. I had all the per diem money that you had and got it straightened out. I had to get room keys to hand as you got off the bus. Meet with the airlines that came in there, meet with the police escorts, meet with the bus drivers that picked you up, and go to the hotel and make sure all the meals were set up, double side buffets, and made sure that they knew that they had a football team coming in there, that they didn't eat like normal people. That
right.
Like if you were going to prepare for 80, you better prepare for 120. And it was, everything was on schedule. The itinerary, you guys got the itineraries. You knew what time you were supposed to be where. And it was up to me to see that itinerary moved along.
Well, I was going to say, I don't think that even the players had any idea just how hard it was to put all that together, how organized you had to be. It wasn't like for an away game, it wasn't the same 70 players for an SEC away game. There were guys who got hurt. There were probably, a dozen to 15 different names that were in and out certain weeks. And then getting all the rooming assignments together. I'm sure after a while you figured it out, but my gosh.
But there was still always a snafu that came somewhere. Mm-hmm. Your meals that you got after the game on a away game, when you came out and picked up that box of chicken that you got on the bus to go back to the plane.
Right.
I would have to make sure that I'd go and meet with them on Thursday, to have it set up for Saturday, and they were to deliver it at the beginning of the fourth quarter. Well, I'd have to be at the gate to make sure they got that food and got it in there, and hope to God that they showed up like they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm. And you weren't able to follow the game while you were waiting. And I'm sure there were games you did not want to leave that seat.
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
And there were no higher highs and no lower lows. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that I don't care what anybody says, that working in athletics or you playing in athletics, you learned that if you got beat on Saturday, you got back up and you got ready to play again. And that plays a big part of life, that if you get knocked down, you don't lay there because you make a big target. You better get up and get moving.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. I want to welcome Kenny Cole who just joined us. Hey, Kenny, thanks for stopping by for our discussion with JJ. June, where was your favorite place to visit away from campus for a college game, for a weekend?
For a college game. I enjoyed going to Alabama, and I can tell you why. The fans were not ugly. I mean, they weren't like the Florida fans, the UT fans. I mean, Florida fans, we sat in the stands and they put all of our tickets over there with the Florida students. They threw food on us, drinks on us, and everything else during the ball game.
Wow.
It was not a pretty thing. And whenever I was at LSU, we went down to Florida to play. And you used to go down, you'd come off the road and go down under the hill, and he would unload at the locker room. Well, Steve Spurrier decided that they weren't going to let LSU go down. They were going to make them unload up on the street and walk through the people. And anybody that knew Coach DiNardo knew how headstrong he was. Mm-hmm. And they pulled up there, and this guy stood up and said, you can't, the policeman said, you can't go down there to unload. You got to unload up here. Mm-hmm. Coach DiNardo just turned around and looked at him and said, no, we don't. We either go down there or we don't play. You can call ESPN and tell them you wouldn't let us in the locker room. We're out of here. He waved his arm and got on the bus and told the bus driver, said, let's go. And he started off, and that policeman ran the bus down and let us down under there to unload. And it was funny because Tennessee had just beaten them the week before. Uh-huh. And of course they was leaning over and screaming at us about they was going to beat us. And so I just looked up at that one guy and I said, hey buddy, can you sing Rocky Top? And he told me where to go.
I'm sure you didn't make a friend right there that time. I want to welcome Rock Batten, just joined us. Hey Rock, good to see you, bud. Of course, we're talking with JJ. Everybody knows her during her tenure there and even afterward. Now, in the last several years, June, have you been able to attend Vandy games either at home or on the road?
Yes, I sit with Beverly. We sit 2 rows behind the bench.
Well, I was going to say, even the current Commodores probably know who you guys are. And if they don't, they need to learn real quick who you are.
And of course, Beverly's still there working. And so I go with her, and John Gromo sits right behind us. And you said Jimmy Manley was there. Jimmy Manley don't realize, but one homecoming I was there, and this little tap on my shoulder, and I turned around. It was big old Jimmy Manley standing there, and I was so excited to see him. And I thought he took the time to come down there and say hello.
Well, you know, it's not hard to like and appreciate what you, Beverly, and Lucy did for the program. And if you didn't appreciate it during the time that you were there on the team, you certainly came to appreciate it later on in life. And I'm hoping that more guys were kind and went out of their way to be kind during their time that they were there, not just when they came back for homecomings.
I never had a player act ugly and disrespectful the whole time I was there. Mm-hmm. And I would see some of them would be down, and you knew some of them had flunked the class, and you knew some of them were having a hard time, but they never were ugly. And a lot of it, I think they knew we cared. It was a labor of love to work there with the athletes. And you would just tell them, hey, keep pushing. It's going to get better. It's going to get better.
And you know that it's that kind of human to human contact, just letting them know, just those little statements mean all the difference in the world. You know, you're not, most of these guys are from different states and different parts of the country. And you know, it's not like a coach is going to pull you aside and kind of pamper you a little bit. They expect you're growing up, you're going to be a man, or you are a man, and you need to start acting like one, and you're not going to be babied like you were maybe in high school or in junior high. But it just takes those little comments from you or from Beverly or from Miss.
Well, our job was to pamper them. The coaches could kick their rear end, but our job was to pamper them and tell them it won't hurt so bad tomorrow.
Now, I want to take you back. This began during the DiNardo time period when they would break for fall camp and go out. See, it wasn't during my time when they went out to Bell Buckle. Did you guys have any responsibilities while they were out there? I know you did. You had responsibilities. I didn't mean that. Did you have to go out there? Was my guess.
for 10 days, I lived at Bell Buckle.
Wow. You got to tell us about that.
Rick George and Andrea Poole and I went down probably 2 days before the players got there, because they had dorms, and we had to make sure all the linens were there and all the stuff they need. And of course, Magic brought the kitchen down. The training rooms were there. The weight rooms were there. And it was in the middle of nowhere. But so whenever I went down there, I packed for 10 days of shorts and t-shirts and things. You were there. I mean, it was sun up till just about midnight before
you collapsed in bed, and then you had to do it all over again.
But it was so funny though, on the first Friday night that they pulled in there with the bus to come to camp. They had already passed the agility drills in Nashville, because if they didn't pass the drills, they didn't go to Bell Buckle. And but they pulled up, and it's in the middle of God knows nowhere. And those buses pulled up in front of that building, and they had 2 big street lights up above them, and they unloaded, and those buses shut the door and drove off and left them standing there. And one guy said, "Oh my God."
He just said what everybody else was thinking.
Oh yes. But it was a bonding time that I think Coach DiNardo did a fantastic job of getting those players, because he made sure that they were all mixed in together. He said, "You will get to know everybody on the team while you're here." And they did. And they had skit night. We had a good time. Of course, Magic fed us like I went to football camp and looked like I could play when I came back, but that was okay.
I'm sure that wasn't true. You probably felt that way, but I'm sure
it was so funny. Now, I guess it was the second year we were down there that one day, because I had to patrol practice field and to make sure that the people that were there at practice were people that were involved in the program or people that we knew.
Right.
And of course, the people from Bell Buckle came and all there. But we let them know when they came that you don't come in here wearing the other team's colors. You either wear neutral or you wear Vanderbilt. Well, these little boys decided they was going to wear their UT shirts. And they come bopping into practice, and I went around and I said, "I'm sorry, but you've got to leave practice. You can't stay." And they said, "Why not?" And I said, "You're not wearing Vanderbilt gear, and if you're for another team, you're not going to be in here." Well, evidently it ticked them off, because that night they came back with orange paint, and they spray painted a lot of the equipment. And they had UT 45, Vanderbilt 7, November the 31st. Well, they called the cops and all the next day. Well, and I had the names of the little boys that was over there, so that's naturally who they're going to go check on first. And that's who had done it. Well, their mom and daddy came over, and we were standing outside waiting on Coach DiNardo to get out of practice. And this daddy said, "Well, how do you know it wasn't a Vanderbilt fan that did it?" And I said, "First clue, Vanderbilt people knows there's only 30 days in November." And his wife got tickled.
I bet. See, it's stories like this, June, that just make these conversations so much fun for me.
Oh, we had a ball. I said I loved every minute that I worked there. Now we had our down times, but we still all just hung together. And I was divorced, and I had my 2 daughters, but I didn't divorce till they were like in sophomore, 8th grade and senior in high school. But it was our entertainment. It was our social life. You had the dinners, the banquets, the ball games, and everybody getting together for fellowship after the ball games and things like that. So it really provided a family life for all of us.
Gosh, we're getting close toward the end of our discussion, and gosh, I could talk to you for hours. I'm sure you have so many great stories. I'm just trying to think where to go next, because there's just so many things that we could talk about.
You should be there when a bunch of us get together.
Well, you know what I was going to say is I bet you probably all finish each other's stories. You all know because you were probably all there together. And just like any athletes, when they get together, a little bit of the truth does come out. But my gosh, those stories just get longer and longer and longer. If there were 30,000 people in the stands, by the time you're done 30 years later, there was 130,000 people in the stands.
And you knew it wasn't true because the stadium wouldn't hold it.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Lucy Jones and I, about, I guess it was about this time last year, we drove over to East Tennessee to see Mr. Kramer. It had been on my mind. I need to go see him. And of course, he's like 90 or 92 years old right now. But we drove up. I called him and told him we wanted to come over and see him. And he thought we were coming over to go over to East Tennessee, over to Gatlinburg and through there. But we went to see him, and he took us to the club for lunch and all. We sat out on his balcony overlooking the Smoky Mountains. You could see about 4 or 5 ranges of mountains from his balcony there. Mm-hmm. We sat out there and we talked for 3 solid hours, laughing about the things that went on while we were there. And Lucy went to her car to get something. And Mr. Kramer said, JJ, now what are you and Lucy going to do for the rest of your trip? And I just looked at him. I said, Mr. Kramer, we drove over here just to see you. And he had big tears come up in his eyes.
Oh, I bet.
And I said, it made it all worthwhile. And the next morning, about 9 o'clock, my phone rings. And I answered the phone. He said, JJ, Roy Kramer, I just want to tell you how much fun I had yesterday. Oh. And we used to put on skits, Bernie. You wouldn't believe. We'd make sure that McGugin Center was locked and that nobody was in the building with us. Uh-huh. We would have a party, like a Christmas party, but we always had the McGugin players, is what we called them. Uh-huh. And we put on skits about things that had happened during the year.
Okay, you've just opened the box. You've got to share a couple of those stories. You've got to tell us about the McGugin players. Well, come on, JJ.
Well, when George Bennett left and went to Clemson, we had a funeral. They got a casket from the funeral home down there, and they put a dummy in there. And of course, they had the pallbearers bringing it in. Richard Baker singing "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot," because he was, as far as we was concerned, he was dead. And of course, he sat there, he and his wife, and just howling and then we went to telling different things that happened while he was there, like when we had promotions for the new stadium, we set off fireworks. And they set them up too close to the field, and some of the fireworks rained down in the stands and this kind of stuff. I mean, we had all kinds of things.
Now the statute of limitations is long gone. You're good. You're in the clear with some of that.
Oh yeah, but that was so funny. And of course, people would call, and they would ream poor old George Bennett out about the traffic on game day. They had bought a house there, and they had bought a condo there, and this traffic was and you'd have to look at them and say, for God's sakes, didn't you see the stadium when you bought the house?
Common sense out the window there.
No, I mean, sure. And they wanted us to make sure that they had places to park around their house. Well, that's what you get for buying in the city.
That's right. That's exactly right.
But we had also, when the fireworks went off, it wasn't too long after Vietnam. We had a bunch of Vietnamese living in Nashville, and they were over at a craft fair in the park. Well, when the fireworks started off, of course, they thought it was the guns in Vietnam. They were diving under tables and everything.
Oh, no. Well, JJ, I got to ask you, mystery coach says, do you remember about Watson's 40th birthday party?
Yeah, but he let the mystery coach tell it.
I figured it would come to that, but oh my gosh, there's so many great stories. I'm sure we hadn't even scratched the surface with what you.
Oh, we could go on for hours. But I will tell you, when I left LSU, Vanderbilt still played a part in my life. I came back, and I was working for a nonprofit that was run by my cousin, just because I had to come home quick, and I came back and I was working for that. Well, I sent my resume over to Caterpillar Financial. And the girl told me whenever I sent it over there, she said, it may take you a year or two to get on there. I said, it's hard to get on. Well, I sent it on Thursday. On Monday, I get a phone call, and this voice said, "May I speak to June Jakes?" And I said, "Yes, this is she." And he said, "This is Joe Page at Caterpillar," and said, "Are you the June Jakes that worked at Vanderbilt?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "I think I know you. Are you the June Jakes that worked at Vanderbilt?" And I said, "If you're the Joe Page that played football at Vanderbilt, you do know me." And he said, "Get over here, girl. I got to talk to you about a job." And I had a job that week.
Wow. You know,
so it was the connections through Vanderbilt that opened that door. And I retired from there 3 years ago.
that's fantastic. It's not just the connections that you make in situations like this, but it's also a tribute to you. And you know what I'm hearing, June? I'm hearing all kind of laughter. I'm hearing all kind of great memories that you're sharing. I'm sure there are tears. I'm sure there were bad times as well, but it's the overall sense of how you made it a family and how you just enjoyed what you were doing. It may have been tough at times, long hours like you described, etc. But sorry, I live near a hospital. There's a hospital helicopter going by. But you made it. It wasn't a job per se. It was a profession. It was a lifestyle. And it sounds like you just enjoyed it. And I'm so happy to hear these stories and to catch up with you this evening about all of it.
I've had a ball going down memory lane, but there were weeks that we would put 60, 70 hours in.
Oh, I'm sure.
And more. You thought nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
You thought nothing about it. It was just what had to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, June, sadly for me, I think we're coming toward the end of our conversation for this evening.
Hey, I've enjoyed it. Hey, guys, thanks for listening in.
Oh, some more folks have rolled in, and Joe People says we went to Bell and came back.
Yep, we had T-shirts that said "I've been to Bell and back."
Awesome. Well, Mystery Coach says that we need to have a reunion at Edwards Steakhouse.
I told you who Mystery Coach was. Yes, we do. And I can tell you, if you ever come to Nashville, we'll all go up there. And Bernie, the food is fantastic.
I can't wait to make a trip. I, like probably the rest of the world, is so ready to travel and get back to some sense of normal.
Aren't we all?
And we will get there. We will. We're going to have college football this fall. We don't know what it's going to look like just yet. But I know that we're all craving for some sense of normalcy, whether it's a new version or whatever it's going to be. But June, thank you so much for spending some time this evening.
Bernie, thank you for asking me to do this. This was fun.
It was fun. And guys, we're going to keep rolling every Thursday night. I've got these lined up through the summer. So you're going to hear from some folks who've played more recently. We've got some guys who've made it into the pros. We've got some other folks who've already retired from being in the pros. So just keep coming. And Thursday nights at 7:00 Central, we're going to keep doing these as long as you guys want them. And I hope you guys have a great evening, weekend. And don't forget, anchor down.
Yep. Anchor down. Bye-bye.